when I was 16, ended up going on a trip to Botswana on the African continent. That was my first time on the African continent. And, they say a lot of times people say you go to Africa, you either love it or you hate it. And I fell in love for sure. And so just kind of grew up feeling this call to full-time missions, and ended up going to Youth with a Mission, YWAM, in Jacksonville, Florida when I was 18, to do a discipleship training school. And that's actually where I ended up meeting my wife. She was there doing a school of frontier missions. So that's how we met, and ended up getting married. That was 2006 when we got married in 2008, and launched Okoa Refuge.
Welcome to Real Man Talk, discussing the tough issues facing men and their families every day. Here's Anthony Curnutt and Tyler Workman.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Real Men Talk. Today, I have got such an exciting podcast. So I've been trying to get this podcast to happen for months now. And so I'm so excited for you guys to meet Tyler Workman, who is the CEO of Okoa Refuge. Did I say that right?
Okoa
Refuge. Okay. And I am so excited for you guys to meet him. He's got such an amazing story. He does so much stuff. And we got introduced. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Tyler, you and we got introduced through a mutual friend, Sean Moore, right? Who we've had on the podcast before. And so Tyler, I'm so glad to have you on and to share your story and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for having me on here. Yeah, like you said, my name's Tyler Workman, and my wife and I started an organization called Okoa Refuge 17 years ago now, 2008. And we kind of joke if we ever had thought that anybody would ever have heard of this organization, we might have chosen a name that was easier to say. But Okoa is a Swahili word, and it means to rescue, to redeem, or to pull away from the fire. And our mission is that we exist to glorify God by partnering with the local church to strengthen the family unit and transform entire communities. And that's another one we kind of joke about, we feel like that was a God-given mission to transform entire communities in Jesus' name. But if we had known the lengths and the depths that the Lord was going to take that, he just took it way beyond what we could have ever imagined, right? Which is because he's such a good God. And so, 2008, we founded this organization, and we do a lot of different things, but they all kind of fall under four main ministry pillars. And so the first of those is that we care for orphans and vulnerable children. And that's really one of the things that we got our start with, was caring for orphans and vulnerable children. We built our first children's home in Masaka, Uganda, in 2009. And since that time, it's really grown. We've got a baby home for children 0 to 3 years old. We've got boys and girls homes for kids 4 to 15. And then we've got what we call an independent living program for kids 16 to 22. And so our aim is that no child would ever have to grow up in an institution. And so we've got an awesome team of social workers, caseworkers, that are trying to get these kids back into healthy families.
And you do all of this in Africa, in Uganda and East Africa, right?
That's right. We majority of our work is done in Uganda, and then kind of our discipleship type ministry, which is running Bible schools, planting churches, and sending missionaries. We do that in 10 African nations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how did, and I know you probably still have a lot of stuff to just spell out about yourself, but
Sure.
How in the world did you get started here? One, you don't look very old. You look pretty young. Um,
39
y-
this in October.
yeah, so you are pretty young. Um, how in the world did you get started in Africa doing this?
Yeah, so I was really blessed to grow up in a Christian home, godly parents who are still together, and we grew up in a Southern Baptist, pretty conservative kind of background up until I was about 10 or 11 years old, and we started going to a non-denominational church that really had a strong emphasis on missions.
Hmm.
And I went on my first short-term mission trip when I was 13 to Lima, Peru, and really that trip opened my eyes to the world, to missions, and it really just changed the trajectory of my life. And really, after that trip, every summer I was going on a different summer missions trip to a different place. And when I was 16, ended up going on a trip to Botswana on the African continent. That was my first time on the African continent. And, they say a lot of times people say you go to Africa, you either love it or you hate it.
Hmm.
And I fell in love for sure. And so just kind of grew up feeling this call to full time missions and ended up going to Youth with a Mission, YWAM, in
Hmm.
Jacksonville, Florida, when I was 18 to do a discipleship training school. And that's actually where I ended up meeting my wife. She was there doing a school of frontier missions. So that's how we met and ended up getting married. That was 2006 when we got married in 2008 and launched Okoa Refuge. And we both felt called to full time missions. We both felt called to unreached people groups, to the African continent. And we ended up taking a group of teenagers from the church that we were just kind of volunteering, helping in the youth group. We
Hmm.
took them with another organization on a mission trip to Uganda. Um, and so it was like a 3 week trip. And that was really our first experience with Uganda. And I'll be honest, we didn't at the time did not feel like called to move to Uganda. At that time, in 2008, we had just gotten married. I was 21, she was 22. We had just launched the organization, and we were praying and asking the Lord, like, where do you want to send us? And
Hmm.
we were like, hard places and unreached people groups, and we had a heart for Muslims, and so we took that short term trip, and then we went on a scouting trip to Central African Republic. That was kind of a crazy experience. Lots of guns pointed at us, had our passports taken, and
Oh
my
man.
wife, my wife said, "I don't think the Lord's calling me to Central African Republic," and so, long story short, the Lord just continued opening doors in Uganda, and we ended up going back there again and again. But between 2008 and 2012, we um, started started our first children's home, started our first Bible school there in 2011, and then moved there full time in 2012. So that's kind
Wow.
of how we ended up in Uganda, of all places.
Yeah. So do you live in Uganda now?
We don't live there full time anymore. We lived there 12 years.
Wow.
My wife, and then I've got 6 kids.
Me
Um,
too.
right
Let's
now,
go.
range from 8 to 21.
Yep.
So I have 3 biological kids and 3 adopted Ugandan kids. And so, yeah, we were there full time, 12 years. And then about 2 years ago, we made the move to Colorado. And so now we're
Okay.
like half time. My kids are pretty much full time in the States.
Hmm.
My wife is in Uganda 4 times a year. She goes once a quarter for
Hmm.
2 weeks. And then I'm about 6 times a year for a total of about 18 to 20 weeks. So we're there about half time.
Right.
About 26 weeks of the year, one of us is in Uganda.
Yeah.
But we've got just an amazing. I mean, the Lord just blessed us, and and we worked really hard and we're really intentional about building an indigenously led organization.
Right.
So over the years, we've grown. Now we've got about 280 full-time staff, and we've got about 140 part-time staff, and they're all indigenous. Um,
Wow.
and so that was something, yeah, that we were just really intentional about from the beginning and wanted from the beginning. And so the organization, hasn't skipped a beat.
Yeah.
It's not there full time.
And I love that mission of building the family,
Mm,
right? Uh, the family is the most, probably the strongest thing the Lord has created.
that's right.
And if you're going to change a culture, you start with the families.
That's right.
And I love that mission. You know,
Hmm.
that's powerful. It's
Yeah.
powerful. And I would imagine that it's probably a handful. Of course, I've never been to Africa. I've never been to Uganda. I don't know what culture's like there. Um, but and even here in the States, it's difficult. You know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean, um, I think that family, the local church, being the way that the Lord has given us to reach the world.
that's
I
right.
think that one of the most important things that the local church does is help build healthy, strong, God fearing, Bible believing families within a community.
Mm-hmm.
Because as the gospel strengthens um, the family unit, then those families start to transform their communities.
Right.
Because a family that is transformed by the gospel is going to transform the community around them. And so that's a big part of, it's in our mission statement, but it's a big part of what we do. We run, right now, I think we run 130 Bible schools in 8 African nations. We've graduated about 2,500 adults through that program, and we're accredited through Makerere University, which is a university in Uganda. Um, it's considered the fifth best university on the continent. So we just got
Wow.
lucky that it was near us,
Let's
and we
go.
were able to get our schools accredited through there. So it's a 2-year um, diploma in biblical theology, and those students and graduates, there are disciple makers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they are going out into their communities, into lost communities, and now we're sending them into other nations, reaching unreached people groups, to make disciples and to find what we would call a person of peace
Yeah.
in those communities, right? The person that the Lord has prepared beforehand to be a gateway, a person of influence in that community for the gospel then to spread in that community. And so our graduates and students have started close to 3,000 what we call discovery Bible studies uh,
Mm-hmm.
in over 3,000 communities. We've been able to plant about 1,200 churches since 2016 with about 35,000 members. And those churches, just what we are talking about, strengthening those families within those communities so that they can transform their entire communities. And another thing that we do, we kind of to partner with those local churches, we have a program. It's called the Community Empowerment Program,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty similar to like a Compassion International model, where
Okay.
the local church is partnering with families in their community and sponsoring children in homes. And so what we do is we partner with the church that we've planted and a pastor that we've trained.
Mm-hmm.
Then we empower that local church to partner with 50 of the most vulnerable families in their community.
Oh
And
wow.
what that does is provide some food security. It's going to send the kid to school. They're going to have weekend discipleship programs at the local church.
Mm-hmm.
And then through those community empowerment programs is really one of the main ways that our ministry has grown into so many other areas,
Yeah.
like our work with kids with disabilities, our work fighting gender-based violence and human trafficking has come because the gospel transforms a family. And in this case, it transforms 50 families within a community. And then those families are coming to us and saying, hey, we've had this 3-year-old with disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we've been hiding them, right, from the community because of the stigma, or, people will think that our family's cursed, right? But
Right.
now we've learned that this child is made in the image of God, and we want to love this child. And, how can we help our child, right, our disabled child?
Right.
Which has then led to programs where we support disabled children in the home, and then we've built physical therapy centers where we give out devices, and we're doing corrective surgeries and all these kind of things. Or they come and they go, hey, my neighbor's been beating his wife, you know, um, and nobody's really cared, but now, right
Right.
now, the gospel has transformed us, right? How do we help? And so that's kind of what has fueled a lot of the different ministries that we're now a part of, which, then led to a partnership that we have with the Ugandan government and Ugandan law enforcement now to train their police officers. Now we're able to carry firearms in Uganda, and we help make arrests. And now we have a law firm in Uganda to help prosecute
Wow.
the perpetrators that we're arresting. And so people sometimes will look at the ministry and be like, isn't this mission drift? Like, how aren't you doing too many different things? And really, it's all one thing, man. It's the
It's all
gospel.
part of the same mission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the gospel. And when the gospel transforms a community, we kind of say this is just kind of like the exhaust, right, of what happens when the
Right.
gospel, and all of these other parts of the community get impacted and changed. And so that's kind of what has led to this over the last 17 years.
Wow. Good night. That is a lot to unpack.
It is.
Um, it is absolutely amazing. So Uganda, um, do you deal with a lot of Muslims and different things like that? Of course, everything right now you hear about in the States is from Nigeria, and I understand that's a different part of the continent.
Yeah.
But have you been affected by any of the Islamic?
Yeah.
Was
Faction.
it? Yes.
Yeah. Groups. I would say not a lot. So Uganda does have a small percentage. I think it's about 20% of Uganda is Muslim. But of course, we are kind of surrounded by nations that are affected a lot more.
Yeah.
And really, if you look at the continent, um, everything kind of north of Uganda is going to be predominantly Muslim.
Hmm.
Um, Uganda is predominantly Christian, although kind of like America, that those statistics are a bit skewed.
Right.
There's a lot of Catholicism in Uganda, and there's a lot of mix and match with your religion, right? So, are
Yeah.
you a Christian? Yes. But if you were to ask, do you also practice witchcraft or worship ancestors? A lot of animism, right? They kind of like, yeah, I also do that, right? So,
Right.
those statistics are a bit skewed, um, but Uganda and kind of all the countries below would be predominantly Christian
Okay.
on the continent. In fact,
Yeah.
right now on the African continent has more Christians than any other continent in the world.
Wow.
600, about 630, 640 million Christians on the African continent. Um, but there's kind of a line. Everything in the north is going to be Islam, and everything in the south is going to be mainly Christianity. But there's also 990 unreached people groups on the African continent,
Wow.
most of those being Muslim. And so some of what we've experienced, like we have a missionary in Democratic Republic of Congo, and you've probably seen some of that stuff in the news in the last 3 to 6 months,
Hmm.
with kind of the M23 Rwanda-backed rebel group, which has been operating in DRC forever, like
Right.
25 years, fighting with the government.
Yeah.
And that's escalated in the last, 6-8 months. And in the midst of that, some of these smaller Islamic factions will use that chaos, right, to come in. And so you'll get these stories of they've come in and slaughtered, 60 Christians or beheaded 80 Christians here. And so our missionary there has felt the impact of some of that. There's a group called ADF that will sometimes come over the border into Uganda. And they are now, ISIS claims anything that the ADF does, ISIS claims it. So they're kind of claiming they're, that Islamic State.
Right.
But it was, last year, I think, that they came over the border and attacked a girls' high school in Kasese, Uganda. And they killed about 50 to 60 Ugandan girls in the school, machetes, and then burn the school down. So we see a little bit of that, but it's more in the surrounding nations. It's like we have a missionary in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. So of course, especially right now, it's escalated. There's a lot popping off over there right now, and then even Central African Republic, mainly Islam. Up in the northern part of Uganda, we have a missionary in a place called Yumbe, and she's working with the Aringa people, and they're 99.7% Muslim. That I would say in Uganda is probably where you would have the most fanatical Islam. And so like when we've planted a bunch of churches there among the Aringa people. When we were first planting some of our first churches, they would come and stop us. They would come and burn them down like right after. And then we ended up actually getting some protection from the Ugandan police, and we would actually build these churches under like armed guard of the Ugandan police. We've seen a lot of fruit up there in the last like 6 or 7 years with our missionary there. We actually have like a missionary training facility now. So as we're training up Ugandans to send them as full-time missionaries, that's a place where they can go and really learn a lot about Islam in the field before we send them to places like Sudan and Chad and Egypt and Benin, all these places where we have missionaries, Ugandan and South Sudanese missionaries in the field.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's I don't know. It's really kind of hard to take it all in. I mean, you guys do so much. Yes, you guys do so much. It's so amazing. We do. I have a love for apologetics, and I do a lot of studying and stuff like that. And right now, I teach a class, and right now, that's what we're talking about is Islam and the differences between Islam and Christianity, and and all that good stuff. And so, man, that's it. It really is. I didn't even realize. I'm gonna be real honest with you. Until I had met Sean, I didn't even realize that you guys were over there, and you guys are making such a huge impact. And I don't expect you to go into grave detail or anything like that, but I'm sure this has not been an easy journey, right? Kind of expand on that just a little bit. Like I said, you don't have to go into details, anything like that. Whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's had its struggles over these last 17 years. I'd say one of the bigger trials that we kind of faced as a family moving to Uganda happened really kind of early on when we first moved to Uganda. We moved there in September of 2012, and we really had kind of started to get established. We had a children's home, we had the Bible school operating there, and we were partnered with some Ugandan pastors. And so when we got there full time, we realized, hey, not everything is quite what it seems, and unfortunately, it's kind of a common theme. But we're running a children's home, and we come to find out, hey, a lot of these kids aren't really orphans, right? And there's, hey, where's this money going, and where did that money go? And we thought we owned this, and right. So we found out there's a lot of corruption happening, a lot of deception, and so we were able. We had to kind of cut ties with the pastors and some of the partners that we had in Uganda pretty quickly. So we moved there September. Really, by the end of November, we kind of had an idea of what was taking place, and we had to cut ties. And when we did that, I would just say all hell broke loose. Right?
Yeah.
We ended up getting arrested. We ended up actually getting put on national television. So this was about December of 2012. I get called to like a community, like a tribal meeting. And this was maybe 2 weeks after we had to cut ties with our partners.
Right.
And so I show up to this meeting. The whole village is there. The pastors that we were partnered with are there. And then I see that there are news cameras there as well from what's called Bukete TV, which is like the national news in Uganda. And the pastor gets up and basically says, hey, these guys are training rebels to overthrow the government. They are sexually abusing these kids. They're homosexuals. All this stuff, right? He's getting put on national television. And so for the next 10 months or so, probably one of the hardest years of our lives. We got arrested multiple times. We had people try and throw acid on us as we walked through the community. We had people poison our water tower at our home. And then we even had a group come to where our main campus and like children's home and everything was, and actually tried to take my, at the time, about 18-month-old daughter. A group of like 10 guys, sticks and shovels and all this stuff. And me and a couple of the Ugandans had to put like the beat down on those guys.
Yeah.
And, and they, we let the rest of them drag their friends out of the compound, but then we ended up just kind of getting blackmailed and, by like every official in Masaka, Uganda. And without making this a super long story, the Lord used this situation, and it was, like I said, it took almost a year, about 10 months, for the community and the authorities to come to understand, hey, none of this stuff is true.
Right.
So we ended up getting to have all these meetings with all of these high-ranking government officials and people in the community where we didn't pay the bribes they were asking for, and when they said, what are you guys doing, we were able to share about Jesus, right, and share the gospel. And so the Lord fought that battle for us. I mean, I think I was 24 years old, and had no idea what I was doing, had no idea how to fight a battle like that, and the Lord fought for us, and it ended with us back on national television in Uganda with the mayor of Masaka, with a guy he's called the regional district commander. They're saying, hey, all of these accusations were false. And here are the good things that this organization is trying to do in our community and for our people. And the pastor and his wife ended up being kicked out of their network of pastors and churches. And what it did really was just like built the credibility of the organization really, really painfully, but really quickly. Where within our first year, we had a lot of really good relationships. We had been investigated by everyone, so everybody knew we were there for the right reasons. And the Lord just used that platform, I think, to build, success for us, and really, I should say, influence and trust in the communities. So yeah, it has not been roses the whole time. We've definitely faced some opposition and some persecution, and just as the Lord always does, He uses. I shouldn't even say He uses, because I I believe he causes, right? He is sovereign and in control of all things, and so he causes those things to change us and grow us, and to glorify himself.
Yeah. Wow, man. How many times did you want to quit?
That first year, man, it was about a daily, a
Yeah.
daily, a daily struggle. And and had a lot of people saying, "Hey, you need to get out of there. Like it's a
Yeah.
dangerous situation. You need to come back home. Get your kids out of there, and those sort of things." And we just felt strongly that that this is what the Lord had called us to. And again, not because of our strength or because we're special, but because we just trusted that the Lord had a plan.
Yeah.
We were confused and we didn't know what that plan was, but we just said, Lord, we trust you, and you're going to have to fight this battle on our behalf, and He did, and He used it to glorify Himself. And one cool thing I like to mention from that is like the deputy mayor of Masaka during that time was one of our biggest um, opposers, right? He was one
Hmm.
of the biggest voices of opposition
Yeah.
against us. And now he teaches at our Bible schools. Like he's a believer. He works for the organization. He's a teacher, teaching biblical theology at one of our Bible schools. And so just really cool how the Lord used all of those things.
Yeah. Man,
Mm.
that is awesome. And I can only imagine. I can only imagine how hard not only just a situation like that being difficult, but being so young,
Mhm.
right, and going through that. You know, I I can't even imagine.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and that depth of Lord, here I am, right? I mean, because that's what you had to hold on to, right? And
Yeah.
here we are, and the Lord has used that faithfulness. Obviously, you guys have changed, pretty much an entire nation,
Mhm.
for the cause of Christ,
Amen.
and through that hardship. But man, just as you look back now, and where you are now, I'm sure that there are not only that moment, but kind of like what you were saying, these moments that the Lord has used,
Mhm.
and the maturity level that you have reached now could not have been obtained without those instances, right? Without the hardships, you know. Um, every single time I've seen um, when we go through things, the Lord always uses those when we're like, okay, God, no matter what it is, whether you're in another country, whether you're fighting, a battle of sickness, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. When
Right.
you stop and you're like, Lord, okay, I
Mhm.
don't know what's on the other side of this door, but I know you're going to take me through it, right? And every single time you get on the other side of that, and you're going, how in the world did I get here?
Yeah.
you
How
know,
did I, how did I make it? How did I survive?
yeah,
Yeah, I think those are the moments, those where the Lord is really just sanctifying, um, and growing us to be more like Him. Um, yeah, it's never wasted, right?
right,
The pain and kind of the hardship, the challenges. Um, we were never promised an easy road
that's right,
as believers. I think it's one of the probably the least taught thing in the American church, but probably one of the most important things to be taught, especially when you're discipling people,
yeah,
is that suffering is part of it. We talk about following Jesus, right? That's what discipleship is, and
hmm,
talk about being the hands and feet
that's
of
right,
Jesus. But we forget what happened to those hands and feet. They had
yeah,
nails pierce them, and and we are to follow our master. And said, "Look what the world did to me," and I'm
that's right,
creator of the universe. So it's going to hate you too, right? If
Yeah.
you want to be godly, then expect persecution, says in Timothy, So
Yeah.
we can't be surprised when we face trials of many kinds,
Mm-hmm.
um, but we have to know that that is what the Lord is using to refine us, to accomplish His will, to glorify Himself, and especially, I mean, it's in all the walk of every Christian,
Right.
but I feel like, especially with anyone that the Lord has called to be like an international missionary or someone who
Mm-hmm.
is maybe taking the gospel somewhere that the gospel has not been to yet.
Right.
Um, that's part of the deal, right? I mean,
Right.
think about like I love the story. There's a story of like um, this missionary in India, right, who is walking to share the gospel, right? He's walking these great distances, and he's going to these villages and these communities, and he's sharing the gospel, and he goes and and they're just total rejection, persecution, maybe even physical, like beating this missionary, right? And so he leaves, and he goes and he falls asleep under a tree, and some of the leaders from the community, they come, they're like wanting to know where he went, right? Make sure this guy really left and isn't going to come back. And they go and find this guy asleep, and they see that his feet are just all tore up, cut up,
Mm-hmm.
and from walking to bring the gospel to them. And when he wakes up, he's got all the people of this community all like surrounding him, looking at him, but not angry, but looking at him and waiting to hear what he has to say. And the change is when he's like, "What happened? Why do you want to hear now what I have to say?" And they say, like, "We saw your feet, and we saw what you went through and sacrificed to bring us this message, and so
Mm-hmm.
we want to hear that message." And
Wow.
it's just a little story of like, when we bring the gospel to a place where the gospel has never been, part of what we're there to do is to be an ambassador, a representative of Jesus,
That's right.
and we are to share in his sufferings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And represent that to them.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's just, to not be surprised and to know that it's part of what the Lord uses to glorify himself and expand his kingdom.
That's right. That's right. Because as a Christian, we understand and we believe that every single person is made in the image of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? They all hold value, no matter what the culture is, no matter where they're at in the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they all deserve that,
That's right.
to understand and to know the love of Christ. You know what a mission, what a what a call, you know. Um,
Yeah, it's an honor that we get to be a part.
yeah, it I don't find myself without words very often. You know, um, that's it's amazing. It really is. And kudos to you, your organization. For and I love the way that you've done this. What you've done so far. Because I go back to the original point. God created that Malachi talks about. God created the family on purpose, right? One of the many things is to expand the kingdom through generation after generation,
Yeah.
and to strengthen that family. Which is kind of what we do. What Real Men Ministries is
Mm-hmm.
about is how do we grow up men, right? To be the leaders that God has called them to be, first in their homes, then in
Mm-hmm.
their churches, and then in their communities, right?
That's right.
We change culture, we change communities through the generations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we're so bad. You can probably attest to this more than anybody else, but I feel like here in the West, in the United States, that we want change right now. And we realize, we forget that the enemy's playing a chess game,
Yeah.
right? We're not playing checkers, we're playing chess.
Yeah.
And and to make impacts that are generational, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just, oh, let's go in and put a band-aid on it, right?
Sure.
I don't want to teach you, I don't want to tell you as a man that you're doing wrong. I don't give you 10 ways to do this. I want to teach you how to be a father, right? I want to teach you how to be a husband, and then allow God to work through you to change your children and your wife,
That's
right?
right.
And that's exactly what you guys are doing. Initiating the family there is bringing generational change, and I'm sure you guys have been there long enough, I'm sure, to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. You know, we've in our children's home now, we've been there long enough, like you said, that we're starting to see some of the kids who have grown up um, within the children's home who have been in, unfortunately, in situations where they can't go back to the home,
Mm-hmm.
where we haven't been able to find relatives and people uh, to get them back into a family, that are now, like, we have social workers who, children who grew up, we sent them off to college, they became social workers, and now they're working in the children's home,
Wow.
in counseling and leading the kids who are there now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I believe, and I think what you were just talking about, is like, if we go in as the church to try and change a community, uh, choose any social aspect, right?
Right.
Whether it's healthcare, whether it's, how many kids are surviving birth, right? The birth rate, like
Mm-hmm.
literacy, um, the courts, right? The justice system, any of it. If we go in as the church and we try to say we're going to come in and solve this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might be able to for 20, 30 years. But as soon as that money that we're spending or that person that's leading it is gone, it goes
Mm-hmm.
away.
Right.
Because the only thing that changes it is the gospel,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're trying to deal with symptoms and we're not addressing the disease.
That's
Uh,
right.
but when we come in and we bring in the gospel and we target families, the transformation of families, that's the only time we start seeing societal shifts that are
Right.
sustainable and that go on for generation after generation. Um, there's guys way smarter than me that have done like in-depth research studies on the history of the last 100 years of the history of missional movements all over the world and
Mm-hmm.
the impact that they have made. And the ones that go in and say, you know what, we're going to try to make healthcare better, right? We're going to spend all this money and this time and try to improve healthcare in this sector of community or this country or this community,
Mm-hmm.
right? They might go in and spend millions and millions and spend 2 decades, and it has a 2 decade impact. And when
That's
they're
right.
gone, it's you can never tell they were there. But
Right.
the mission movements that come and say we're bringing the gospel, right? And we're targeting the family and local churches, this is where you see over generations the the death rate and childbirth go down. You see literacy go up. You see healthcare get better. You see violence against women and children go down. You see education go up. Like across all of these sectors, the thing that really brings change is the gospel coming in and changing families and changing and local churches being strengthened, right? That's
Right.
such an important part of it too, is that as a if we go from the mindset of the Western church coming in, um, that we are empowering indigenous believers
Yeah.
to carry on that work, and we aren't coming in and say, "Let me come in and change it to be what I think it should be."
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what you're doing is exactly what Jesus did. Is you were changing a culture,
Hmm.
right? We look at the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7, And I think people failed to realize what Jesus was doing there. In that sermon, he was, everything in it was so countercultural, right? And I mean, and that's exactly what you're doing. Here you are, you have a culture. And again, I've not been there. So I mean, this is just common sense, I guess you would say. You have a culture, and it's been this way for however long. Without bringing the gospel, right? Without bringing the gospel, you're never going to bring sustaining change.
That's right.
You can't.
No.
Because it is the gospel of Jesus Christ that truly changes a culture. That's right. You can go into Chicago right now, and you can try to do all the same things you were just talking about, healthcare and, all this stuff. We don't want people dying on the streets, and all this stuff. And as soon as that's done, it's going to be the exact same way. You bring in the gospel, you can change a culture. And it doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter what you're doing, which is so important about us as men, right? That we have the ability to change the culture through our families, right? Which is exactly what you're teaching in Uganda. We have the ability to change. Whenever I raise my children, right? Something we teach is we grow off the platforms of our parents, right? So if you have no platforms, then you build a platform, and your children will grow off of that, and then their children will grow off of that platform, which is even higher than the one that you set, right? And that's generational change. That's right. My children are and doing more now. I have a 21-year-old and a 20-year-old. That are doing more now at that age than I ever thought of, right? Living for the Lord and doing, and this is not patting myself on the back. This is following biblical principles. I built a platform for them to grow off of. In that platform is Jesus Christ, right? And so they are able to take that platform and grow higher.
That's right.
Right. And when you do that, that creates such a devastating change, right? Such a lasting change. And man, it is so powerful to see that kind of initiative, right? For a real global church, right? Growing in and not saying, hey, let's make you look like us. Let's make you look like Jesus. Right? Let's make you look like Jesus. And honestly, it's so encouraging that this is happening, right? And it's kind of sad because I've never even been on a mission trip. I've never
gotta come and visit us,
man. Let's do it. We'll just make it happen. And, we've been something I've been doing is I have met some people in Pakistan that we've been ministering to and through, via like Zoom and stuff like that. And that's something I've been trying to pour into. I've never been there physically. But it's wild because everybody's so hungry. You see these people, and Tyler, it's the wildest thing because I've never experienced anything like this until last year. I met this guy. His name is Sharoon. It's a long story. We won't get into it. But one day he's like, "Hey," he said, "Will you speak for me?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said, "I'll put you on my iPad, and I'll translate for you." Right. And it's happened. I've spoke 4 or 5, 10 times, something like that. We've seen salvations. We've seen people being healed. We've seen demons cast out. We've seen, and I'm going, what is happening? You know what I'm saying? I mean, over Zoom, and what I realized, these people are so hungry. They're so hungry, in a place like Pakistan where it's 99% Muslim, Islamic, these people that they're hungry for something. They're hurting. They're, and here they are. They're having church where they're sitting on floors with no walls outside because they can't do it inside.
Right.
Nobody will allow them, right, without
Mm-hmm.
running them off or killing them or burning the place down, and all of the same things. And I'm going, oh my goodness, it is. But they are so hungry, and when they meet something as real as Jesus, right? When they meet truth, you can't help but just grasp a hold of it. I mean, think about your conversion story, right? When you first come to I know you were raised in a Christian home, but I was too, to an extent. But I can remember I was 19 years old when the Lord drastically changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
I can almost remember where I was sitting, right? And I remember this truth. I didn't realize what it was then, but what I experienced was real, and it was truth, right? Yeah. And when you experience that, it doesn't matter. That's universal, right? It doesn't matter where you're at. When you meet Jesus, right? I love hearing these testimonies of people meeting Jesus in their dreams, right? When you meet Jesus, you can either run or you're going to change, one or the other.
Right.
And that's the only two options you got, and so, man, it's awesome. Tyler, man, you are so encouraging. This is awesome.
Thank you for having me on. One thing you said reminded me of a story. I was in Afghanistan in 2006 and was in Mazar-e-Sharif. It's about 8 hours from Kabul. And there was an Afghani. In 2006, I was 19. And this Afghani, that I met, his name was Zalmai. He was 19 years old. And he told me a story about how he got saved. And he had found a Bible in this town in Mazar-e-Sharif. I mean, there are like no Christians, right? And he finds this Bible and, starts reading it. He's keeping it secret in his bedroom. He lives with his brother and his dad. And he reads it, and just what he said, like, it was truth. Like, he read it. Nobody had ever told him about Jesus. Nobody ever preached to him. He's reading a Bible, and he's like, this is true. Yeah. And he gave his life to Christ. And he was about 15 when he gave his life to Christ, when he found this Bible. And for years, he lived with his brother and his dad and was secretly a Christian. And he kept feeling convicted, right, to share with his brother. And he was so afraid that it took like 2 years.
Yeah, because it cost him everything.
Yeah, it could have cost him his life, cost him everything. Yeah. Minimum just to get kicked out of the family, right?
Right.
And so finally, like, he got up the courage and he's sharing the gospel. He brings out his Bible. He's sharing the gospel with his older brother. And his brother just starts weeping and hugs him and says, I've been a Christian for a year and I've been too scared to tell you, right? So just wild, like, just reminded me of that, just how the Lord can reach anybody, and when the truth hits them, and because of that, like, Zalmai's passion was just to get the word of God into people's hands, and super risky, right? In that place to do that, but it just reminded me of that.
Yeah, man, and that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter if you're in the States, it doesn't matter if you're in Africa, it doesn't matter where you're at, right? That's our job as men, as Christians, to spread the word of God, to be the word of God, to be that light, to be, to share Jesus, and to raise families, and to bring generational change. Yeah. That's what it's all about, equipping not only ourselves but the people around us, right? And, we're difference makers. We are we're disciplers, right? We believe here at Roman Ministries that every man is birthed with influence, and that influence is a gift of God, and you are influencing somebody all the time, right? And we use that influence to change lives for Jesus Christ. Yeah. And that's exactly what you're doing halfway across around the world. And man, it's encouraging, not only you, but your family and And you know, now that you have children, you said you have a 21-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
which see, you're kind of young to be having a 21-year-old, so I'm guessing
Yeah,
that one's
adopted.
adopted.
Yep,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
right.
So I have 6 children too. My oldest is 21.
Oh,
My youngest is 5. We have one that's
oh, wow.
adopted, and
Awesome. I
yeah.
love it.
And so we, funny story, not to get off topic, but we found out my wife was pregnant with our youngest, who's 5 now,
Mhm.
2 weeks after I had scheduled my vasectomy. And
Of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, God knew we needed him. And
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do without him now. He's amazing.
Right.
And,
Right.
so, but Tyler, before we land this plane, I want you to really plug Okoa Refuge, right? So if somebody's listening to this and like, man, I want to get involved.
Hmm.
If at the very least, I want to give, right?
Hmm.
How do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, you can go to our website, okoarefuge.org. We also have an app. It's on the Google one and the Apple one, however all that works.
Yeah.
You can download, and that's a great way to kind of stay connected to what we've got going on. Social media, of course, we're on all that stuff as well. Instagram's a great place to stay connected. But there's tons of different ways for people to get involved. Um, like I said, you can come on a trip. So we do a lot of mission trips every year. We probably host 150 people a year on trips.
Hmm.
So that's an awesome way. You can join a trip that's already coming, or you can get a group together and come and really experience it firsthand on the ground in Uganda, see the ministry, and kind of be a part of what's happening there. We've got a lot of different ways between like you can sponsor a kid that's living in the rescue center. You can plant a church. You can sponsor a missionary. So our missionaries that are in the field, it's $500 a month to fully fund a missionary living and working with an unreached people group, right? So that doesn't mean you need to give $500 a month. You can give $5 a month. But what I
Right.
mean is for your return on investment, that's a really good one. So just tons of different ways you can fund an arrest, you can fund a prosecution, a rescue with all of our anti-trafficking, and you can support victims. We do long-term survivor care of
Hmm.
victims of sex trafficking as well,
Wow.
in partnership actually with the Tim Tebow Foundation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, tons of different ways. Website, social media, all that stuff. You can connect with us. We'd love to connect with you.
Yeah. That needs to be another podcast. Sean and I talked about, talking
Mm,
about the sex trafficking
yeah.
and the in which I didn't even I had before me and Sean had talked, I had discovered the Tim Tebow Foundation. I'm
Uh-huh.
a football guy anyway, so Tim Tebow
Yeah.
was always, I
Yeah.
like Tim Tebow.
He's
But
awesome.
whenever
Yeah.
I discovered his foundation that he had, I began to look at his research and different things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then
Mm-hmm.
Sean and I was talking about it, and I think he'll be talking to you again about the three of us being on a podcast and talking about
Yeah.
the sex trafficking, which will be a really heavy one, I'm sure,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's devastating. It's devastating here in the States. I can only imagine what it's
Mm-hmm.
like in other countries,
Yeah.
and in Haiti and Uganda, and
Mm-hmm.
and so that's something that we'll save for another podcast. We don't have time to unpack today,
Yeah.
um, but
Would love to come back.
yeah,
Talk about
and I'd
yeah.
love to have you back. Tyler, I want to thank you. And know that you and your family and your ministries are in my prayers,
Thank you.
prayers of the people that'll be listening. I know we have a great fan base, and they're awesome dudes, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Is there
you.
anything else you want to plug in before we land the plane?
I just wanted to thank you so much for this chance and opportunity, to share about what the Lord's doing through Okoa Refuge, and it's awesome to meet you and
Yeah.
to be on the podcast. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you guys that are listening, listen, go check them out. Okoa Refuge.org. Is that
Yep.
right? .org.
Okay.
And go check them out. Check them out on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. They've got phenomenal, I've been going through it just as research today, looking through the stories and what you guys have done. And it's just, it is so encouraging to know the impact that you guys are having for the kingdom of God over there. And so go check them out. And if you guys have got any questions for me, you can always email me, realmen@palaceofpraise.com. You can reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And so, but Tyler, as always, I want to say a prayer. And as we end this, Lord Jesus, I want to thank you for Tyler Workman and his family and what they're doing over in Uganda. Lord, we pray blessings, not only monetarily, but protection, Lord, and just emotionally and spiritually, Lord, of him and his family, but his team, the people who are on the ground, the missionaries, Lord, we ask you, Lord, just pour your spirit upon them, Lord. And as people are watching this, Lord, tug at their hearts, Lord. And if they feel the need to give, Lord, or to be a part of, Lord, just lead them that way, Lord. And we give you all the glory and all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
You've been listening to Real Men Talk. If you'd like to get in touch with us, shoot us an email, realmen@palaceofpraise.com, or visit our website at realmenministries.us. You can also message us through social media. If you're a man age 16 and up and would like to be a part of the conversation, join us at the Palace of Praise every Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. If you don't have a home church, consider joining us for worship on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. Palace of Praise is located at 1400 Herschel Best Boulevard in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. New episodes of Real Men Talk drop every Thursday at 5 p.m. on all major podcast platforms. You can also find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. Real Men Talk is a production of Real Men Studios in cooperation with Palace Media Services.